9.
Now, picture the scene. You're taking in some of the UK's finest tourist spots when you decide to take a few photographs, of course. But before you've had a chance to frame the shot, you're stopped by the police under Section 44 of the Terrorism Act.
And this is what happened to Jerome Taylor, an amateur photographer, stopped when taking pictures of the Houses of Parliament, and he is here to explain what happened. And he's not alone. We've got lots of emails and texts this morning from people who say similar things have happened to them. So we've invited Chief Constable Andy Trotter from the Association of Chief Police Officers to explain and to tell us what action police are allowed to take and what rights we have. So, firstly, Jerome, we have the photographs that you took. What happened?
I was taking photographs of Parliament last Monday evening from the south side of the Thames. 2 police officers came up to me and performed what's called a stop and account. It's not quite a stop and search, but it basically allows a police officer to ask you what you're up to. And in the course of that stop, they took down my name, my address, my date of birth and my height as part of kind of standard procedure.
And did they explain why, or whether they thought you were a
the reason
threat?
it was given on the form that I was given was using a camera with a tripod. It seems to be the case that officers seem to regularly stop people who use tripods or tend to be using professional-sized cameras rather than little cameras.
Now, it's often hard, Andy Trotter, Chief Constable, to get you to sort of talk about a specific one, but Jerome is here and this happened. So maybe you could give us insight into what was going through those officers' heads using that legislation in this context.
Well, quite clearly officers are on patrol in certain sites all over the country, but particularly around London, looking for suspicious behaviour, looking for abandoned packages, things such as that. But quite clearly in a case like this, it's hard to understand why Jerome should be stopped in these circumstances. I mean, taking photographs of the Houses of Parliament is a pretty regular thing, particularly from that venue. I would expect patrolling officers, if they're interested in something, to wander over and say hello. Ask what's happening, is everything okay? And then once they're satisfied, move on. There's no need to turn this into a stop and search, in my opinion.
And the stop and account, people may not have been aware of that one before. I mean, if a police officer comes up to you, you're taking a photograph, and they ask you to account for yourself, do you have to? I mean, you're just stood there taking a photograph. What do you have to do?
Absolutely. The police officers can use their powers under the Terrorism Act to stop people, to find out what they're doing. Because clearly, since 7/7, we've been very clear that our job is to protect the country from a terrorism attack. But in these circumstances, it does seem a little excessive.
Yeah, we have examples also and other photographs. 2 photographs of St Paul's Cathedral taken a few days ago by BBC photographer Jeff Overs, who was stopped by police. We also have a photograph of a fish and chip shop in Chatham in Kent, taken by Alex Turner in Kent back in July. He was stopped and arrested when he took a photograph of the 2 officers questioning him. I mean, you say that, obviously police officers might come over, might ask you some information, but arresting someone who's taking a photograph of a fish and chip shop seems...
Obviously very difficult to talk about those specific circumstances because none of us know exactly what happened there. But quite clearly, what we expect officers to do is to be alert when they're on patrol, but not overuse their powers. These powers must be used sparingly and carefully. They are quite an intrusion into people's civil liberties. And we want to make sure that our officers are out there using these powers intelligently. It's not an offence to take a photograph. It's not a reason to stop someone just because they've got a camera.
And Jerome, when they stopped you, did you say that I didn't know it was an offence to take a photograph? I mean, what was your response? Were you worried about inflaming the situation?
No, I mean, I knew I was perfectly entitled to take the photograph, and to be honest, I have no problem with police officers coming up to me and asking me what I'm doing. What I found particularly difficult was the idea that just through the act of taking a photograph of our seat of democracy, police officers would ask my name and my address, and then that would then be kept out of police office for the next year or so. And that I found was, slightly overextending. And I had no problem with the police officer asking, what am I doing? It was pretty obvious what I was doing because I had a tripod and a camera. But.
So, I mean, is that a justified worry? I mean, what happens if you do give your details in? Are they kept in a system? I mean, is that logged? Do you then mark down in some way in a computer system?
Well, clearly, if we take the details of the person that's stopped, both for protection of that person and of the police officer. But I come back to the point that we don't want our officers doing this. This is not what they should be doing.
Sorry, can you just answer that issue about whether Jerome's details now, are they kept? I mean,
yes, they would have been kept, yes.
Under what? And, as what? As someone who's been questioned?
No, as a record of a stop. We are obliged to keep the details of people we stop. I mean, that's what we have to do that. That's to ensure the protection of the officer and the person we stop, and we have to do that. But my point is there's no need to go that far. ordinary patrolling by an ordinary police officer very quickly would have satisfied themselves that Jerome is doing nothing unusual.
Can you refuse to give your details?
Yes, you can.
OK. And Jerome, how do you feel about the fact your details are now on record?
Well, that was the thing that concerned me initially. I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that you don't need to give your details unless you're driving a car. You don't need to give your details during a stop and search or a stop and account. The question is, do the members of the public know that? Now, most members of the public, they don't want to lie to, or not lie to, if a police officer asks them a question, they will answer it. And I think it's a difficult balance to strike between protecting the public and allowing civil
I'm just thinking in the real world, in that situation, if the person refuses to give any details, then you might be worried that might inflame the situation because it looks like you're not cooperating.
No, but people should know their rights, and the police officer should also tell them that as well. They're not obliged in those circumstances. These powers were brought in to protect the public. They shouldn't be used to oppress this sort of lawful everyday activity. And I think my task is to ensure our officers know that more clearly.
OK. Andy Trusted, Chief Constable of British Transport Police, and Jerome Taylor, photographer. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.